Leo, let's do a photo.
Welcome everyone to talk today by my colleague and friend, Cuando. I guess most of us here are here because we love the game. I have a strange anecdote that when I was at the university professor, some other university years ago, I became legendary because I've watched every single game in all World Cups since 1986, even when I was a kid. I love football with all my heart, and that was a special time for me. I enjoyed that year very much. But it became a legend that every time I was teaching, for example, I had two computers. One of them was actually with the slides, and the other one was showing the match because I could. Remember, I think Luca has a slide about it. There's a movie, Moneyball, in which people start doing analytics about which players to choose to go on the poster for baseball in that movie. And that movie tells you a lot about how we're doing sports at these times, right? And basically, there's a lot of data being generated by a lot of things. I mean, how many people go into the stadiums, how many people come out, how many people buy things. And that's only the life of the stadium itself, right? I mean, there's also the sports analytics about the person, like the individual players, for example, how they move through during their games and stuff like that. People, like all these machines that they're wearing or that they're being identified by AI and stuff like that. And this has become a wonderful new field of study, the sports analytics. And I think there's really a lot to be learned from these studies. And what's best is that we now have one of the leading experts in the world on these things. And one of those, the person that has done pioneering work on these sports with real data, individual level data, is going to talk to us about it today. So I'm very happy to introduce to you Dr. Luca Papalardo. He works at the CNR, which is the Italian National Center for Research. He's done a wonderful job in the analysis on several areas. We work together on mobility, but he has done all these beautiful studies on soccer and football and catch. And so I will leave it to him.
Muchas gracias, Leo. And thank you, everybody, for inviting me here in to the day and in Santiago. Very happy to be here. As Leo was saying, I am from this Italian National Research Council, and in particular from this KDD lab, which is a very big laboratory shared between the National Research Council and the University of Pisa. We are more than 40 people. We do a lot of different things, including sports analytics, as I will show you today. And I'm also part of this So Big Data Plus Plus project, which is a very big European project for creating a research infrastructure for big data analytics, in which we help people We welcome people to come in PISA or the other institutions to work with us on several topics, including, again, sports analytics. And this is one of the most ancient, let's say, laboratory on artificial intelligence in Italy. What soccer analytics or football analytics, as you prefer, is about? Let me tell you a bit the history of this field, which is at the same time very old and very recent. First of all, this field has its roots in soon after the World War II, thanks to this guy, Charles Reap, which is a British accountant, who was really amazed by the beauty of football, and he went to the stadiums all Sundays and Saturdays at that time to watch the games, and at the same time to fill a book with all the statistics in that game. And indeed, he invented the very first kind of data collection in football. And indeed, for more than 2,000 matches from the 50s to the 90s, he wrote down all the events that have occurred during the matches, all the passes, all the shots, all the falls, and so on and so forth. And then he made some statistics on it. And actually the very first, or among the very first football analytics papers are by this guy and a statistician. They studied what is the best strategy to score. And they discovered the famous long ball theory. That is, the best way, according to them, to score is to take the ball and launch it in the opponent area. And this actually influenced a lot English football till, probably the 90s to the early 20s. Of course, we know that then Spanish, thinkers contradict this theory. Indeed, we know that now it's better to take the ball and make a lot of passes. Indeed, in that long ball theory, there was a flaw in the statistics, but no, this is another story. Maybe we can talk about later. Then there is a second era in the 70s by this legendary guy, Valery Lobanovsky, who was the legendary coach for Dynamo Kiev and Soviet Union national team. And he was the first one to use a computer to make some football analysis. Indeed, together again with the statistician, Valery Lobanovsky used the computer to make computations about how football players should move on the field. And he also published, together with this statistician, a paper about that, a book about that, which is unfortunately only in Russian, so there is no translation in English or other languages. Then this is the second era, so the first time computers were used for football. Then there was another year, the current era, in which sports analytics and football analytics are popularized, mainly thanks to this famous book and movie. The book in 2003 and the movie in 2011, that is Moneyball. As Leo was mentioning, in this book is a story about of a manager of a baseball team that found a way to hire very underevaluated players. And that guy almost was able to win the championship, but with very, undervaluated players and very cheap players. So this book first and movie later popularized basically sports analytics. And now there are, the sports analytics exploded in 2020, also because of the pandemic. People were in the house and started making some football analytics. And there are several books that I would like to suggest you. The first one is The Numbers Game of 2014, if I'm not wrong, by Anderson and Selly, in which they take soccer data and they try to confirm or contradict some very famous saying in football. For example, it is true that corners are useful. It is good to change a coach if the team is doing bad, and so on and so forth. They take data and they confirm or contradict several of these sayings. Then there is an entire YouTube channel for that, Friends of Tracking. I also did a video for them in 2021 and 2020. It's very interesting because all the experts in soccer analytics speak about the very diverse aspects of soccer analytics and football analytics. For example, about the data, about the tactical analysis, about how to use the data for predicting match outcomes or to prepare the team for the next match, and so on and so forth. It is very interesting, and I recommend it to you. Then there is also an entire machine learning workshop dedicated to this field. It is the workshop on machine learning and data mining for sports analytics within the ECML PKDD conference, which is one of the leading conferences in machine learning, at least in Europe. Okay, so this is what we are talking about, a new field that is at the same time very old and very new, and that exploded in the very last few years, and especially in 2020. So now groups all around the world work on this topic. Why? Well, mainly because now, for the first time, we have data. We have free data to do that. In you will see a story. I will tell you the story of how we get the data. But initially, was not that easy to get the data from companies. Then it was easy, and now it is hard again. So it's a very strange story. But what are the data that we can use to analyze several aspects of soccer? And what are these aspects of football that we can analyze? So I want to talk about, in principle, the football data landscape. I think, we can classify the data sources in three main categories: GPS traces, video tracking data, and match events. I will talk to you about later an application only for the third one, for the in interest of time, but they all are very used nowadays by soccer staff, by TV shows, and so on, to show and to compute some statistics about football matches, players, and so on. First of all, GPS traces. So you may know that now soccer players are wearing this, they called it sports bras, right? Because actually they are sort of bras. And they are within a device, including a GPS device. And this means that they can record all the movements these players do during all the training sessions, matches, and so on and so forth. And indeed, from these movements, we can extract a lot of very useful information to track, understand, monitor, and even, why not, predict the fitness status of a given player. For example, we can extract the high-speed running, the accelerations, the metabolic distance, the decelerations, the total distance, the high metabolic load distance, the fatigue index, and many, many other complex or simple measures. And of course, then you can also attach this information to external information, such as the injuries experienced by players, and many, many other, for the age, the role, and many, many other information. This kind of data is mainly used to perform injury prediction. So there are some companies, including a startup we founded at the University of Pisa, and also some research staff within soccer clubs that use the data to try to predict whether or not and when possibly a particular player will get injured. Then we have another kind of data, video tracking data. Video tracking data, again, they track the movements of players, probably much better than GPS traces. And these are made by video cameras that are installed in stadiums. If you look well in stadiums, there are video cameras installed by these companies. And for each match, probably in all the most important leagues in the world, including the Chilean one, they use this camera to extract some information about the movements of the players, the referees, and even the ball. So each player then is identified, and we have the trajectory of each player. This is important. Why this is important? This is important because it has been demonstrated that the player has the ball only on average 2 minutes per match, on average. So they touch the ball 2 minutes out of 90 minutes. This means that movements of player are as important as the events they produce when they have the ball. So these kind of movements are very important for tactical analysis. And indeed, there are models explaining how well a player is able to move on the field, how well the team is able to move together on the field. Finally, we have a third kind, and probably the most used one, and third kind of data, which is match events data, sometimes called soccer logs, football logs, match events, several names, but actually they are events. Look at this visualization here. This is an example of all the events made in a portion of the Clásico, Barcelona, Real Madrid, by this famous guy, Messi, when he still played for Barcelona. And each event, each of these symbols is plotted on the exact position of the field where it was produced by the player, by Messi. And each symbol indicates a different kind of event. For example, the red arrows are passes. The blue dots are shots. The green dots are dribbles, and so on and so forth. So we can have, for each player, all the most important events that player produces during the match in the exact geographic, let's say, position where it is produced, and also when it is produced during the match. So it's a pretty rich information that can very well describe what the player does with the ball in his feet. And this is, you know, a more computer science, you know, visualization of these events. Actually, these events generally are stored as JSON files, which is a particular kind of format we use in computer science. In particular, this is a pass by Messi in that match. And you can see that, you know, event name is an identifier indicating that kind of event. In this case, 8 is a pass. Then we have event sec, the second one, which is about when, since the beginning of the game, that event has occurred. Then we have match period, first half or second half, primero tiempo, segundo tiempo. Then we have the positions, the coordinates of where this event started and ended. So we know that this event started in this position of the field and ended at this position of the field. Then we have a sub-event name, sub-event name. We can have sub-categorization. In this case, this pass was a high pass. Then we have some tags which indicate some other additional information about that event. For example, 1801 indicates that the event was accurate. So in other words, the pass successfully reached the destination player. Finally, we have other information like, you know, the team ID, the player ID, which are very useful to, you know, match them against databases of players, of matches, and so on and so forth. We have, on average, 1,700 events per match in a football game. And in particular, these data are provided by this company here, Scout. How these data are collected, which is really the most interesting part. We have seen that GPS data are collected through the sports brass, tracking data by the cameras. Well, the data collection method for events is a bit more complicated because companies, including this one, Scout, they use a proprietary software to do that. And this is a visualization of this software. So basically in this software, you have on the left, the video of the match. And then on the right, they have some buttons to tag the events on the match. For each match, there are 3 operators tagging it. 1 operator for a team, 1 operator for the other team, and a supervisor. Then every time one of the operators identify visually an event, like in this case, a pass, then he can click on the corresponding event. He can click on the corresponding, let's say, player, and they can also automatically stop the timeline just to record also when that event has occurred. Okay, consider that this is done for each match in the first league, the second league, sometimes in the third league, for every league in the world, at least the most important one, the professional one, and now both for male football and female football. Okay, so this is done everywhere. and it is really expensive because they have to pay 3 operators per match for all the matches that are played all around the world. Well, these are some statistics about those matches. For example, we have again almost 1,700 events per match. Each player on average does almost 60 events per match. Then there is a match every, on average, 3-4 seconds. And of course, on the bottom right, you may see the distribution, the popularity, the frequency of these events by type. Passes are by far, as we know, the most frequent ones. Football is a passing game, especially nowadays. Then we have duels that are tackles or dribbles. Then we have touches, just you touch the ball for something. Free kicks, intercepts, falls, shots, saves, offsides. And what about goals? Well, goals are probably the least frequent events in football. And actually, they are just 1% of all the events. So this is the beauty and also the damnation of football, that goals, which are the most important events, are also very rare. This is why, in football, when there is a goal, we are so excited, because it is pretty rare. Well, actually now, the number of goals, if you look at statistics, is increasing a lot, at least in the European one, while in the 90s, especially in the Italian one, for example, it was really rare to have more than 2 goals per match. The average number of goals per match was less than 1. Now it's higher than 2. So this is an indication of how football changed in the last 30, 40 years. Okay, so this is the data we have. I want to tell you the story about releasing the largest match events dataset in the world, a story that an action that we did in Pisa together with this company, Scout, because I think it's very useful to understand how it is complex to make data open to the public, which is the fundamental condition to develop a field. Generally, fields develop very well when there are free data to that. Look at computer vision. Computer vision now, it's exploding, but because there are free data that can be used nowadays. So this is also about a paper that we just published in 2019 on Nature Scientific Data, which is a journal that publishes public data. And actually, how we started. So actually, we started doing sports analytics in Pisa in 2013, but we did not start with football. We started from cycling, because Paolo Cintia, who is the other person that developed the research in Pisa together with me, he is an amateur cyclist, very amateur and not that good actually, but he's a cyclist, right? And so what we did is to download information from Strava. In 2013, Strava was not that common. Now is a very popular platform of fitness, social fitness platform, basically. But in 2013 was not that common. And what we did is to download from the API, which were completely open, basically the entire database. And we started doing some analytics on that. What we discovered is that we discovered a confirmation of the so-called overcompensation theory. That is, the best cyclists work a lot and then they rest for a specific period, and they work again, they rest. So we quantified what is this resting period and this working period to be the best cyclists in our database. It attracted a lot of attention, and actually we were spotted by this guy who has a very important blog. So we thought, and also actually, finally they closed the API because of us, because they discovered that there were some Italian guys downloaded all the database. So finally they stopped the APIs and they closed them. They make them for payment because of us. So we thought, okay, but if we got such a success with cycling, why not trying with football, right? Which is, in Italy is like a religion, as it is here and probably in South America. At that time, it was really hard to find some open data set. There weren't. data set open like today. So what we did is to, we thought that you cannot make data science without data. So by definition, right? So we tried to find a way to get some football data. And that was by downloading data from websites. So there were some websites like these ones having some football data, events data. So what we did is to web scrape this data, so to have some database to make some papers on it. And this is actually what we did. So we downloaded the data and we did a paper that we published on a conference, the International Conference on Data Science. Why? Well, we did it hoping that probably this would have attracted even more attention. And maybe, who knows, when you are, let's say, famous, maybe companies come to you and give you data to make some analytics. That was our intention. It get actually attention, and actually there was a paper on our research on Il Sole 24 Ore, which is the most important economic newspaper in Italy, among the most important in Europe. So finally, we're waiting for data. So, okay, so let's wait maybe some companies that we contacted and they said no, maybe now they say yes, or maybe they just contacted us. Of course, it did not happen. So we were still waiting for them. But at a given point, we were lucky because we were invited by FC Barcelona to have a talk at Camp Nou in the first sports analytics conference organized by them. FC Barcelona is among the pioneers in doing sports analytics. They still have a team of football analytics people. They do research on them. So they actually watched our paper and they invited us to talk at this beautiful conference that they do every year in the stadium, Barcelona Stadium in Camp Nou. So finally, in that conference, we were in contact with Y-Scout, which is the company that actually gave us the data. So they looked at our talk, they liked it, and they said, okay, we give you the data and we do research together. So finally, we had success in doing that. But after a while, we wanted to convince them that, okay, we can do research on it. We are pretty happy. But, science is about making also other people doing research on that. So why not trying to release a data set, a public data set for everybody? So it was actually not that easy to convince them that it was useful, but finally we convinced them. And what we did is to release this data set here, which is about, 7 competitions. The European ones, basically the big 5, Italian, English, Spanish, German, and French leagues for 1 season, which means 3 million events. Also included World Cup and 2018 and the Euro Cup 2016. This is about 3 million events, 2,000 matches and 4,000 players. And actually this paper here actually is the second most accessed paper in Nature Scientific Data ever. I don't know what's the first one. I tried to understand, but I have no idea what is the first one. But anyway, we got success for that because actually this paper actually helped the sports analytics field develop much more than before, because now we have free and large public data, so everybody can do research on that. We also organized some hackathons on that, the soccer data hackathons. We did it twice, one in Pisa and one in Trento. Then the pandemic was out and we deleted it. Basically, maybe we do it again next year. Now, regarding still the data thing, we are doing other initiatives to make data even more open. By creating some open source tools that can be used by everybody to tag their own matches, because that now the software to tag the matches is proprietary. So we would like to do a similar thing, but it is open. So we did, for example, this system. This is a work by, if there is internet connection, there should be. This is a work by master student at the University of Pisa. And sorry for this match, Leo. It is France against Argentina, But anyway, this is a, a way to tag the events by using a joypad. We thought that maybe young people can be, very used to use it. And this, this is by a goal by Mbappe, and this is an example of how to use the system to tag that pass in that particular match. Okay. So again, you have the field, you can specify the position, then you can click on the player, and there is a certain combination of that you can use to do it. Then we also did another software tool, which is that use artificial intelligence to tag passes automatically from videos. This uses, of course, convolutional neural networks combined with other kind of deep learning stuff. And actually what we did is to give an input to this algorithm several matches with the corresponding match events, the public ones we already have published. And the algorithm was able to actually understand how to associate to a video segment, to a particular event, to a particular pass. Okay. This is important because this is a very first step towards, creating something that is a support for human operators. I don't think we can substitute human operators because it's very hard to tag soccer, football, let's say, matches, but at least this is a first step towards it. In our idea, this is a system that can be used by these companies to make a first pass on the match, on the video, and then you have at least a first idea of what are the most important events in that match. Then, of course, it is needed another pass by humans, but maybe they take less time to do that because they already have some of these events tagged. Okay. Okay, this is an overview of the deep learning stuff. This is boring mathematical thing. I don't want to bore you about that. Okay, what we can do about this data? Just a second. Let me close Slack. Otherwise, they continue writing me. What we can do with this data? I want to show you just an example of two examples of what we can do with that. And it is about performance evaluation and football scouting. So one pressing problem in football is to evaluate how good a player was in a particular match, and in general, how good a player is regarding his or her particular role. Okay, this is a very pressing problem because actually evaluation is done still, by humans, but if you want to find a new talent, you cannot evaluate all the young players all around the world. So you need a system that automate this kind of evaluation. This algorithm I'm going to show you is a first step towards that. Do you know this guy? So this guy is Carlos Enrique Raposo, Brazilian guy, also called Kaiser. And they are going to do a movie about him because he's actually a genius. Evil genius probably, but a genius anyway, because that Brazilian guy was able to change for an entire career, that is 15 years or so, almost every year to change club from Brazil, then to Argentina, then to France, and other European countries without playing any match. So how did he manage to do it? Well, actually, he was a very good guy in the sense that he made a lot of friends within teams with strong players by organizing parties with, alcohol, women, that kind of thing. And finally, when they are friends, when these players moved to other clubs, he asked them to recommend him, right, as a gratitude for the parties he organized. And this way, he was able to change everything without playing any match. And when after a while he was training and the soccer coach asked him to play, he simulated injuries for not playing. And he did it for 15 years. How that was possible? How that was possible because there weren't data available to soccer clubs to look at what is the actual performance of that player. Because if an algorithm evaluating soccer players was available at that time, probably these football clubs were able to understand that this guy was not able to play at all. Okay, so this is just justify why we need that automated first data and then automated algorithms to do that. Actually, there was an entire, story on Gazzetta dello Sport, which is the most important sports newspaper in Italy, about this guy, and they're going to do a movie about him. So the real problem is ranking soccer players. So we want to find an algorithm to rank soccer players from the strongest to the weakest, given a role, given their role. But there is a kind of evaluation, right, that probably we read every day on sports newspapers, which is the evaluation by journalists. Journalists, after every match, they evaluate players by a vote, a rating from 0 to 10, typically, at least in Europe is like that. I assume it is the same here. And as very small, very short description. For example, this is a match by Napoli of some years ago. You can see that here there is let's see, a 6 to Callejon, apre per Allan e lo manda in porta e poi governa I carichi di fatica. That is, he just made some good thing for another player, Allan, and he governed fatigue situations, something like that. This is a very simple evaluation. What's the problem with that? The problem is that this is done by humans, and we know that humans have bias. We are, by definition, we have bias in what we do and what we evaluate. What we did here is to try to use artificial intelligence to replicate the way humans evaluate football matches like that. So what we did is to take the match event data, to transform all this data into variables. For example, the number of passes from that player, the number of shots close to the opponent's area, the number of fouls, the number of yellow cards, the dangerousness of that player, and so on and so forth. And then as a target variable, we put the rating by real journalists. We trained this algorithm, and so we get a pretty accurate algorithm that is able to assign a rating as more or less journalists do. What we discover is that basically the kind of explanation that we can extract from this algorithm is very, very simple. So you know that now explainable AI is on the hype. We not only we want to design accurate machine learning models, but we also want them to be as explainable as possible, to understand the reasoning, more or less, to approximate the reasoning they do when they make some predictions. So this is an explanation, a general explanation of the most important features this journalist, the algorithm that is trained on journalists, uses to evaluate a forward. You may see that there is just only one feature that is used mostly, goals. So basically, if you score a goal, then you are a good guy. Otherwise, you get a very insufficient rating. This is more or less the explanation for forwards. And also you may see that what we call contextual variables are very important. So the result is important. If you win, I am more prone to give you a good rate. If you lose, then I give you probably a bad rate. This is even stronger for defenders. For defenders, basically only contextual things are used. So it doesn't matter how you play it. If you win, I give you a good rate. Otherwise, I give you a bad rate. Similarly for goalkeepers, but in that case, of course, goals suffered is very important. So we used more than 70 variables, but at the end, the variables that matter are just a few. The question is, do we want such a explanation or we want something more complex? Our answer was that we wanted something more complex, even because some kind of explanation can be really driven by the lack of contextual information we have in the data. So look, this is a visualization of an explanation outputted by SHAP, which is one of the most common, let's say, explanation techniques available nowadays. So I don't want to explain the technicalities of how it works, but what it says is that the algorithm AJ gives this guy a 7. That is a good rate, right? on 10 is a good rate. While the actual rate this guy obtained from human journalist was 5.5. So how can we explain this difference here? Well, actually, we can explain with the fact that in this system, we only have how many failed passes this player did. But we don't have any information about the severity of this failed pass. Look at this. No. That's a pity. You know, actually, that was a video by Roma Lazio, which is the derby in the capital of Italy. And actually, so whatever happens in that game is more important than all the other games Roma and Lazio, which are the two most important teams, can do in the entire league. So you can do a very bad league, but if you win the derby, it's okay for supporters. So what this player, Fazio, did is to make a failed pass that provoked a goal by the opponents. Okay, so in our algorithm, we just can say failed pass, but not the severity of the pass. So why there was this discrepancy between the rate by the artificial intelligence and the rate by human? Because we didn't have any information about the severity of the pass. This means that we have to retrain again this algorithm, maybe by adding this information. But you know, at the end of the story, what we discovered is that, you know, of 70, 80 features that we developed, humans were using only a few ones. So we thought, why not to create something that is more refined and without the human bias. So something that was completely data-driven, without any human intervention. Okay, so we developed this algorithm that we called player rank. Actually, we also made a startup on it to use, you know, this algorithm to make some soccer statistics. You know, the algorithm is a bit complicated. Here we have a schematization of it, but you know, in principle, what we do is just to do like that. That is, we know that we don't have objective evaluations at the player level. We only have human ones, but we don't like them. So we don't have any objective evaluation of the quality of a player. But what we do have is the result of the game. The result of the game is objective. So if I score more than you, I win the match. So what we did is to transpose this machine learning problem to the player, from the player to the team. So we aggregated all the features from the player level to the team level. So now we don't have anymore the number of passes of that player, the number of shots of that player, but we have the number of passes of that team, the number of shots of that team, and so on and so forth. Then, as a target variable for the machine learning machinery, we use the result. Okay, so in other words, we did an algorithm able to predict the result of the match given what happened in that match at the team level. Then what we do is to again open the black box of the artificial intelligence algorithm, look at the feature importance, and we get this. So these are the most important features to win a match. Okay, either positive or negative. So this means that assists that are passes that make another player in condition to score are the most important ones. Then you have, you know, and all the assists are very important. So if you do a lot of assists, it's good to win a match. Then we have accurate free kicks and accurate shots, which are the most important ones. Then, of course, we don't use the goals here. Otherwise, you know, goals are already the target variable. But, you know, let's look at the left part about the features that make you lose a particular match. And they are getting a red card or a second yellow, which is an equivalent, or, you know, a failed hand pass, because probably the hand pass is something done by the goalkeeper. If you fail it, it means that the other score probably. Then a late full red card and all the red card thing, and then there are many others, okay? But surprisingly, this is something done automatically by the algorithm. They are more or less meaningful, right? So reasonable. and there is no human intervention. So the algorithm automatically was able to infer that these features are the most important ones to either win or lose a particular match. So what we did finally, we used these kind of features into this kind of equation. So we computed then for each player in a match the amount, the features, then each feature has an importance. We did a weighted sum for that in order to have a score. Okay, so very, very simple. So we use machine learning to gain the importance of the features. Then we computed the features from the data and we did this weighted sum, a linear combination, very, very simple. And we get a rating, which indicates how good that player was in that specific match. Okay. What we discovered? Well, we discovered that first of all, these weights are pretty universal, which it was really surprising to us. That is, if I use all the data, first of all, we use much more data than the open ones. We use 5 seasons, 18 competitions, which are those ones, more than 30 million events, more than 20,000 matches, and more than 20,000 players to train our model to getting the weights. We discovered that if we train the model on all the matches together in the database or on a single competition, the weights are more or less the same. They are pretty universal. So because soccer, to win a match is the same, with just a difference that in the World Cup, the Euro Cup, they are slightly different. So we are able to recognize that there is a difference between clubs and national teams. They play a bit differently, okay? Because in the leagues you have to win in the long term, while World Cup, Euro Cup, and South American Cup and so on, they are very, very short. So maybe you have to play differently. But anyway, this difference was not that big, but there was a statistically significant difference between clubs and national teams. But more or less, we can say that weights are universal. So what do we discover? Well, actually, we used it to make a sort of data-driven Ballon d'Or, so a data-driven ranking of the strongest players in the world. Again, there is no human intervention. This is completely data-driven. And another thing that we did is to compare players role by role, because it makes any sense to compare Buffon and Messi. It's completely useless because they play completely different things. So we grouped the players by their role data-driven roles. That is, we use another machine learning thing to infer these roles. What we discovered, not surprisingly, is that Ronaldo and Messi are the best players in the world. This is, of course, right? And in particular, Ronaldo and Suarez in that season played a bit better than Messi, but in general, if you do on all the seasons, Messi is way far the best player in the world. But this is not surprising, right? We also have other players. This is about 2018, not very recent. So we have Marcelo, then we have Suarez, Ronaldo, we have Neymar, Messi, Müller, and Insigne, and other players that are supposed to be good players. But again, this was surprising because completely data-driven. So just looking at data and using machine learning, the algorithm was able to understand who are the strongest players in the world. Do we need an algorithm to understand that actually Messi is the best? Of course not. This is not the way I would use this algorithm. I would use this algorithm to discover underevaluated talents. I would apply this algorithm for young people, young players in in youth leagues, because in that case you have an automatic way to have a ranking, to get a ranking of all the young players, and maybe you may select some of them and send observers to look at them better and to decide whether or not they are worth playing in the top leagues. Okay, so this is why this is a joke, and it is just a game that we did, but it's an indication that actually this algorithm produces meaningful things. How do we evaluate it? Well, actually, in order to understand if these ratings were reasonable, we asked professional soccer scouts, which, whose job is actually to identify young players that are very talented, to express their agreement with the algorithm. What we discovered is that, actually compared to other algorithms that were existing before, player rank is much more in agreement with the humans that, other ratings were, basically. And basically that's it. So I want to leave now some time for questions. This is just a selection of what we did about soccer. We did several other things. Maybe we can discuss during the questions sessions. But the real motivation why we wanted to make football analytics is that, as the legendary coach Arrigo Sacchi once said, football is the most important of the least important things. And that's it. Thank you very much.
So I would like to open the floor for questions.
Please. Yeah. That's a very good question. Thank you. It matters. Indeed, this is a very first version of the algorithm in which we did not consider neither the space and the time. In more refined version of the algorithm, which we included this information, we discovered that overall space is not that important. It's only important when you are in the opponent's area, but otherwise it's not that important. And time is important only for some kind of features. For example, if you get a red card in the first minute of the match, this is worse than getting a red card in the very end of the match. Okay, so in that case, it matters, and it raises a very important variable. Also, but for the passes, for example, it doesn't matter when you do it. For the shots, it doesn't matter when you do it. So it depends. Actually, space and time are important, but not that important as we thought. So even this very first and basic version of the algorithm works pretty well, and almost as well as a more refined version in which you include space and time. So the answer is space and time do matter, but not that much. Please. I'm sure it matters. We are not able to infer it from this algorithm because the result, which is actually it is the target variable we use for the machine learning machinery, and it is actually we cannot discriminate whether the match was 3-0, 4-0, or 8-0. So of course, this would be a useful information, but that we cannot include in this algorithm by design. But that's a good idea. Probably we should design, a new algorithm that include this kind of useful information. For example, when it's time to change a player or when to make a bet. That is a very good question. But actually, this algorithm is for evaluating. So it's a post. You make it after the match, right? So you have the match, the data describe the match, and you make evaluations. So you cannot predict, forecast anything. What about instead using this data to make match forecasts? Well, of course, as you may imagine, it is so hard and almost impossible. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here, but probably in the Maldives, to enjoy the money. The problem is that football is very randomic, much more than all the other sports. This is probably also why it is so beautiful. So you can very easily predict that, Barcelona will win against the last team in the league, and Colo-Colo against the last team in the league. But it's very hard to predict, Colo-Colo River Plate, what is the result, because they are more or less at the same level, I assume. You can put passion in it, it's so bad for River Plate, but actually it's very, very difficult. So to forecast matches, it's very difficult, and you wouldn't get a result that is an accuracy that is much better than the accuracy humans get. This is why probably this data can be used to improve the forecast. And actually, I'm sure that betting people, professional betting, they use that. But the gain is not that much so that you can create a mafia on it or make money out of it. This is my opinion, at least. Sorry? Of course you can do it. This is something that you can do it. They are using there now because it was not allowed, at least in UEFA and in FIFA as well, since in 2018 it was not allowed. Maybe in 2019 it started to be allowed for teams to use live this information, and they are actually using it. We don't know how, because probably it is industrial secret, but if these data are produced by companies either at the end of the match or some other companies every 5 minutes, meaning that you can compute the rates of the player every 5 minutes. And the end of the first half, you have a first ranking. You may have beautiful visualization of what happened, what are the weakest, the weakest zones of the field, and you can make decision on that. And they are doing that. They use data. We don't know precisely how. People working in clubs, they know. We don't know, but they are using it now since a couple of 3 or 4 years. Maybe, yeah. That is, that is the point, actually. This algorithm should be tested on this scenario. We didn't yet, at least. But there was a particular case in which we tried to do some kind of prediction. And it was the market transfer window of 3-4 years ago. There was an Argentinian guy, Lautaro Martinez. They were Internazionale of Milano. They were discussing about hiring this guy, buying this guy. So we look at the data that we had, 5-season data about Lautaro when he played in Argentina, and actually we discovered that the player rank of this guy was increasing so much. So we had actually a meeting with Inter just soon after when they bought this guy, and we did this analysis. Well, in our opinion, in the algorithm's opinion, this guy is gonna perform very well. And actually he performed very well. Of course, this is just one case. We cannot, take it as an accuracy. But, some indication that we did about this guy, about Chiesa, another very strong Italian player, but others, is that, in single cases, it helps deciding. But honestly, I have to say that we don't have a strong statistical analysis on the large numbers to say that this kind of methodology can really be successful to identify young players, even because there is one missing aspect that is crucial, I think. That is the aspect that distinguishes between a normal player and a champion, which is psychology. The psychological aspect is not included in this data, but we know that is what makes the difference. because maybe there are, take Mario Balotelli, I don't know if you remember that guy. It was really strong, very technically speaking, strong player, but mentally it was not that strong as other players. And finally, he didn't have a very good career. While there are other players who are maybe less strong, but they are mentally stronger, that reached a very good career, for example. So this is just a very first starting point, very first tentative to use AI and data to identify talented players, but there is room for improvement, for adding new features, testing better young players, and so on. We did have access to women football data, and we did a paper in which we tried to investigate, thank you very much, to investigate the difference between male football and female football in terms of accuracy of passes, of speed of playing. And what we discovered is that actually male football is more intense, but female players, at least in the data we had, they rely more on accuracy of passes, because since probably our interpretation is that since they have a less, strong body, what they do is to rely better on technical things, and indeed they are pretty technical. And at the end, there are some difference between the two kinds of soccer, and which makes them pretty two different sports that also shouldn't be compared, actually, shouldn't be classified, ranked. There are two different sports with peculiarities. So the way men play is different from the way women play, at least in the data we had, that is the last World Cup by males and the last World Cup by females, that is 2018, 2019. But we do have some data about female. Now they are starting collecting data for female football more and more because it's gaining popularity. Teams are gonna be professional, and so on and so forth. Ciao. I think we should develop something more tailored to what you want to do, because your interest, if I'm not wrong, is to understand how players on the field make some decision. For example, there is a player on the field, and what is the cognitive or anyway the decision making he or she does to pass the player to another player, right? The ball to another player, right? So what we can do, well, probably player rank is not for that, but the machinery behind player rank can be used to adapt that to your purpose. For example, what we can do is to evaluate each decision as good or bad. And then we use the data about that specific portion of the game regarding that decision, that pass, in a machine learning machinery. That is, we have information describe the decision, the context, how many players I have around me, where I am on the field, and so on and so forth. And then as a target variable, I have the goodness of the decision I did. Good decision, bad decision. This tagging should be made by some kind of experts. Then what you can get by using also explainable AI is to get an evaluation of the importance of all the features to that decision. and in a sense, an approximation of the reasoning the human does when making that decision, in a sense. I don't know if I answered your question or maybe you intended something different. This way, this kind of machinery can be used for that purpose, so to understand the decision making of players. Player rank itself, including also the other parts, not only the machine learning thing, is for evaluating in general the behavior of the player in the match. But some parts can be adapted to other issues and other problems. Please. They are actually, we did another work that I didn't represent, but together with Barcelona and an NBA football team, an NBA basketball team, which we demonstrate that they can be used successfully to predict injuries. Whether they are using or not in practice in football teams is not very clear to me. My perception is that they are, maybe not the algorithm itself, but they are relying on companies that provide these functionalities, including, for example, our startup in Italy. But these apps and the methods they use are not so refined as they are in the search. So as always, there is a discrepancy. We have very good tools in the search, very refined, but they are not used, yet in clubs to perform very good, explanation. But actually, clubs are not interested so much in predictions. They are more interested in explanations. They don't want an algorithm to tell you Messi is gonna get injured. They want you to tell why, what are the risks Messi can experience in getting injured. This is what they're interested more in. Research-wise, we have a lot of work about that. In practice, they don't use it so much. This is at least my perception.
I remember this from when I was a kid. 30 years ago, there was a famous EP from Croatia, Mirko Josic. And he was Colo-Colo. And there was one defender that made 2 goals in the first 20 minutes. This is a real case, but one is data and one is what the guy in charge wants the players do. So it's very hard to work on software, and for sure this is very interesting. And I'm wondering how the game will be 10 years from now with this amazing amount of.
It will be much more data-driven and much more algorithm-driven. Of course, the decision is up to the coach. Guardiola and Ancelotti will decide whether Manchester City will play with the same player or not. But behind, and probably I still believe that during the match, the intuition of coaches will be still better than algorithms predictions, I think, because intuition, experience is much more than an algorithm can do. But behind, before and after the match, we will rely more and more on data and more on algorithms. But they already do that. When they do match analysis and they watch again the matches, they use augmented reality or something like that and data to show the players where they failed and where should succeed to win the next match, basically.
You still need someone to take a decision.
But a decision, it will be always up to humans. So the fear that we all have about artificial intelligence, destroying us is unjustified, mostly, in my opinion, because we have to construct machines as a support to human decision, not to substitute human decision. This is the purpose of technology. Technology is a support, is not an equivalent to humans, I think.
It gets lost in the sea of data. You know what I'm saying? So you don't see those clips because everything tries to be through the normal. And that's the big data.
Big data.
All those, even the enormous amount of 30 million of time, literally just one of the 30 million. You know what I'm saying? So that's important. I don't think that that's true, but that's one answer that the field will share. Lost in the sea of regression. And the other one was, what would you say? The last part?
About the decisions. Yeah.
Computers get blamed much harder than humans. If a computer makes a mistake, the doctor makes a mistake, the computer will always be taken to be more at fault and more wrong, even if it's the same mistake that they made. So we think that computers should be perfect, but humans are way less perfect. So I think that those two things would be expected. If expectations would be too big, and then humans will always be affected.
Agree. It's a nice story. Actually, this is the so-called algorithm adaptation, right? But it is true that is probably we are designing AI wrong. So we should make clear that an AI is not human. So we, at least in the movies, right? We are always forced to make AI indistinguishable from humans. But probably this is the wrong way. We should make it clear that this is a machine, and a machine can be wrong because people perceive computers like things that cannot make any mistake. In this sense, the beautiful movie by Kubrick, when the HAL 2000 and so, it got crazy because it makes an error, right? But artificial intelligence can be wrong. So probably also movies and science fiction, forwarded a sort of message that is not so realistic, first of all, and not so good. So we perceive machines and infallible, but it's not like the case. They make errors, and they should make errors. And we should make people evident to people what is a human and what is a machine. That's my opinion. It's not, take it as you want. Yeah. Yeah, that is. Thank you very much. Thank you. Grazie.